美国12月19日，让我们继续关注本届国会的最后一场拨款法案战役。自18日，当选总统川普及其政府效率部长马斯克和拉马斯瓦米纷纷下场，阻挠国会最后一项超过1500页的拨款法案后，预算谈判顿时陷入混乱。这周末，政府关门的可能性大大增加。对此，民主党人气急败坏，病急乱投医，试图挑拨川普和马斯克之间的亲密关系，让人哭笑不得。
All of a sudden, we have an outside influence who believes, I think he is president, and that's President Musk, who has not elected, has no authority, and trying to really upend what the services are to the American people.
This is ridiculous right now. What he's trying to do is insert something that is a negotiating tool into an already negotiated agreement to keep the government open.
I've got to get my community prepared for what is likely to be a government shutdown. I have Border Patrol agents, CBP officers, TSA, air traffic controllers, a lot of federal employees, a lot of public servants who depend on their paychecks.
My observation is the Republicans are ending the way they began. They began in chaos, unable to elect their speaker for a week, and they're ending the same way. They're a party that's deeply divided and dysfunctional, and it's bad for the country. It's bad for the Congress, and it's a shame.
My Chairwoman, do you believe we're headed towards a shutdown?
Well, if the Republicans insist on this lunacy, then yes, I suppose we will, and it'll be their fault that Americans don't get disaster relief, that Americans don't get their Social Security checks. That is on the Republicans. Mike Johnson negotiated a deal with Leader Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. And now he's reneging on the deal because the shadow president, Elon Musk, said that we shouldn't be doing this deal. So this is on them. They're going to have to figure their way out of it.
We negotiated a bipartisan deal. The Republicans have walked away from it. There are things in this bill that the American people need. So we're going to have to Republicans are going to have to figure out what we're going to do.
We are done. We made the deal, and the deal was made with the total agreement of the Republicans and the Democrats in both houses. It's a good deal for the American people. It provides funds for disaster relief. It provides funds for agricultural relief. For the Republicans, for President Musk to come in at the last moment and blow up the deal is just intolerable.
而来自华盛顿州的民主党议员瑞克拉尔森则指责马斯克角色扮演总统，主导了这场潜在的政府关门。
That's as important as what is going on right now. And the main question I want to ask you is, who is in charge? Who is in charge of U.S. House of Representatives right now? Here on Capitol Hill, we're waiting for the House of Representatives to go back into session and waiting for the House Republican leadership to do something about funding the government. But who's in charge of this? Is it Elon Musk, the billionaire? Is it President-elect Trump, the person who is not yet president? I ask that question because Republicans, under the direction of a cosplaying President Elon Musk and a very confused president yet to be Trump, they have pulled out of the bipartisan funding agreement to keep the government funded. Congress needs to pass this bill to keep government operating and send this bill to President Biden's desk where it can be signed into law, and it has to happen by tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. East Coast time. If we don't do that, the government will shut down. And if the government shuts down, it will clearly be on due to the hands of the Republicans. A shutdown would be devastating for the people in the communities I represent. Yes, thousands, tens of thousands of active duty military folks who live in Washington State will continue to go to work every day during a shutdown, but they will not get paid. They will not get paid. So that is what a Republican shutdown, a Musk Republican shutdown, will mean. Tens of thousands of workers who work every day to ensure that the government is working for you will not get paid and will not be going to work as well. That means they won't have money to spend over Christmas. They won't have money to spend at the grocery store. They'll be biting into their savings. You, watching this, you may be one of those folks who will be biting into your savings in order to survive a potential shutdown. Women, infants, children who live in my district are, some of them are dependent upon support in order to ensure that their children grow up healthy. Those kinds of folks will be impacted negatively by the Musk Republican government shutdown. Now, I will say this, Democrats have been part of bipartisan agreements throughout the last 2 years. On the FAA bill, a strong bipartisan agreement. On the defense bill, a strong bipartisan agreement. On supporting America's foreign policy and our strong foreign policy, Democrats have been part of bipartisan agreements. We were part of the bipartisan agreement to keep the government operating as well. But it was the Republicans under Speaker Johnson who publicized the text, the final agreement, and it was the Republicans who pulled out of that final agreement as well. And that final agreement includes disaster relief for farmers in Washington State. It includes disaster relief for Washington State to repair some of the roads and highways that have been damaged in past wildfires. It includes disaster relief for the poor folks in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida that were victims of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. All of that is on hold now because of the desire of Elon Musk and the Republicans to shut down the government. But we stand ready to negotiate in good faith, in a bipartisan way, as we have throughout this entire Congress. But I couldn't tell you who we're supposed to negotiate with right now. Is it Speaker Johnson? Is it Elon Musk? Is it not yet President Trump? We don't know who's in charge in the Republican Party right now. And if it's any indication of the next 2 years, we're in for a lot of chaos in the House of Representatives. Meantime, middle-class Americans are being held hostage by a billionaire who's pulling the puppet strings on the president yet to be Trump.
众议院少数党领袖哈基姆·杰弗里斯更是对共和党展开了猛烈的攻击。他声称，原本旨在避免关门的两党计划在18日破裂，这是一次鲁莽的由共和党驱动的关门。
Good morning. House Democrats met earlier today, and we are resolved to continue to stand up for the best interests of the American people. House Democrats, House Republicans, Senate Democrats, and Senate Republicans reached a bipartisan agreement to fund the government, prevent a shutdown, and meet the needs of the American people. We reached a bipartisan agreement that will help farmers, families, the future of working class Americans, children, seniors, veterans, and the men and women in uniform all across the nation and the world. That bipartisan agreement has now been detonated because House Republicans have been ordered to shut down the government and hurt the very working class Americans that many of them pretend to want to help. This is a moment that's not about the incoming president. It's not about millionaires and billionaires. It's about the harm that House Republicans will do to the American people if the government shuts down. Families will be hurt. Farmers will be hurt. Everyday Americans whose lives were turned upside down by extreme weather events like hurricanes and floods and wildfires will be hurt if they don't get the relief that they need and deserve to improve their quality of life. If the government shuts down, holiday travel will be impacted. The ability of everyday Americans to visit their family their friends, their loved ones will be impacted. Border security and Border Patrol agents will not be paid. TSA agents will not be paid. Small businesses will be hurt in every single community in this country. This reckless Republican-driven shutdown can be avoided if House Republicans will simply do what is right for the American people and stick with the bipartisan agreement that they themselves negotiated.
可以看出，民主党人一方面正试图将马斯克塑造成地下总统的形象，以此营造出功高盖主的氛围，达到挑拨离间的目的。而另一方面呢，民主党人又不断宣传这项拨款法案对美国底层民众的好处，以及政府关门的可怕后果。然而，我们不禁要问，在2019年主导政府关门的又是哪个政党呢？为什么民主党人不断宣称这项法案利好美国人民，而对这项法案中为国会议员加薪的条款只字不提呢？他们到底是真正为底层美国人民着想，还是为了自己能有更多的薪水过圣诞节呢？答案是显而易见的。好，现在我们再来看共和党人对这项法案破裂的反应。尽管马斯克等人的行动直接挑战了众议院议长麦克约翰逊及其他共和党领导层的权威，但共和党人的反应则相对要温和得多了。在19日的新闻发布会上，南卡罗来纳州的参议员林赛格雷厄姆、北卡罗来纳州的参议员泰德巴德和南卡罗来纳州的参议员汤姆蒂利斯采取了中庸的立场，对川普和马斯克等人的行动表达了一定程度的认同，但他们仅强调了将对没有灾难援助的政府拨款进行阻挠，并未对这项拨款法案大加鞭挞。
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm joined here with my colleague from North Carolina and my neighbor from the South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. And we're here to talk about something that we think is critically important, that we do not miss the opportunity to deliver on before we leave town. And that is providing disaster relief for not only North Carolina, which bore the brunt of the storm damage in Helene, but storm damage from Milton, storm damage from Debbie, and storm damage from storms that happened years ago. That's what's a part of the more than $100 billion that was in what we thought was the agreed continuing resolution with the disaster supplemental attached to it. Now we know that that has fallen apart, and in some cases, I think for good reason. But at the end of the day, the people of North Carolina, the people of South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, the list goes on, Tennessee, need relief today. Because everyone needs to understand, we're talking about a possible government shutdown here in Washington. Well, there are parts of this country that have been affected by the storm who are effectively shut down. And until we fund them, they have no hope. What I have in front of me right here, this stack of paper, these are the correspondence that I've received in my office since the storm. So I've tried to decide if I have to filibuster and do whatever I have to do to keep us from going home. If we reach agreement that doesn't include the disaster supplemental, you're going to hear these stories on the Senate floor for as long as my voice and my colleagues' voice can be heard. So I agree with President Trump that we could do better than the CR that was before us. And I also agree with President Trump because he reaffirmed to me yesterday that he believes that disaster relief is absolutely essential before we go home. So I'm just saying to my colleagues, don't forget the people who have been affected by these storms. Their future is literally in your hands. Now I'll turn it over to Senator Graham. If you don't mind, I'll just keep that there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you, Senator Tillis. And I've got an equal stack like this. We've been out there countless times. We've seen the need. Look, there's a tremendous amount that is up in the air right now, and I don't want to get into hypotheticals and different scenarios, but I want to make a couple things clear. The fact that Western North Carolina has had to wait for 83 days is just ridiculous, and it's a disgrace. We've got people freezing in tents, we've got delayed FEMA trailers, but it's time to get beyond these political games. You know, the initial CR, which is now dead, it was a mess. It was a 1,500-page insult to taxpayers. And I just want to make sure that people know for anything to pass, it has to have disaster aid for Western North Carolina to get my support. I appreciate Senator Tillis being in lockstep on this, as well as those who were affected, also from South Carolina and other states. I've had colleagues from both sides of the aisle that have been in disaster states and understand the need, the federal component of this, come to me and say, what North Carolina needs, just let me know, because I'm behind you. So it's not just me, it's not just us up here, it's lots of other colleagues as well. We need this and we need it now.
So I talked to Governor McMaster. This thing's taller than I am, which is...
You want me to get it?
Yeah, no, it's all right. Bad news is I'm not that tall. So the bottom line is I just talked to Governor McMaster. This is essential to South Carolina. Helena, Hugo is legendary in my state. It hit Charleston years ago. The cost to South Carolina, even adjusted for inflation, is twice what Hugo was. More in deaths, more in money. The last 3 hurricanes we've had in South Carolina, the FEMA request combined are less than this hurricane. I cannot tell you the level of destruction that's hit South Carolina in the most odd way. It's not along the coast. It's where I live, up in the northwestern corner of the state. It came to Augusta, North Augusta, went right up the Savannah River and wiped out Asheville. And everything sort of to the left of Beaufort to Charlotte, that line just flattened. I've never seen anything like it. So people ask me, what's going to happen? Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get the help you need now, not later. President Trump has committed to making sure that the disaster relief component is part of any deal to fund the government. I agree the CR had things in it it should not, but disaster relief is an absolute must to get my vote and my support. I cannot go home, and I will not go home. I'll be reading letters with these guys until we make sure that the farmers who've lost everything, the families who've lost generations, not just one part of the family, entire families have been wiped out, that they know help is on the way. So how does this move in? People say you should pay for the disaster package. We haven't in the past, but now's not the time to bring that up. We've had months to talk about that, weeks to talk about that. Border security, taxes, we're going to pay for all that. But if this is not an emergency under federal law, what would be? If this doesn't qualify as an emergency, nothing will ever qualify for emergency. So to my Republican colleagues, we're going to pay for border security, we're going to pay for rebuilding our military, and we're going to try to offset the expense of cutting taxes, and I think they actually pay for themselves. But we're going to get this package out the door as soon as we can. People back home need it. It's just not about South Carolina, North Carolina. This disaster package includes 3 disasters that affects Virginia and Florida. So this is a must-do. We're urging the body to have, a clean CR, right, with this package, and let's go home and come back next year and hit the ground running.
不难看出，国会共和党人对于这项拨款法案态度暧昧。他们既不想冒着得罪川普和马斯克的风险通过这项藏污纳垢的法案，又不愿意承担致使政府关门的政治后果，左右为难，只好着重强调救灾款项。好，最后再来，我们来看2则国际新闻。当天，俄罗斯总统普京在莫斯科年度记者会上为俄罗斯在叙利亚9年的行动辩护，并声称对川普的乌克兰谈判持开放态度。
You, well, those who pay your salaries, would like to present everything that is happening in Syria as some kind of failure, a defeat for Russia. I assure you, it is not true. Of course, we look forward to peace in the Syrian Arab Republic. We maintain relations with all the groups that control the situation there, with all the countries in the region. The overwhelming majority of them tell us that they would be interested in us keeping our military bases in Syria. I don't know, we have to think about it, because we have to decide for ourselves how our relations develop with the political forces that now control the situation in that country now and will control control it in the future. What can I offer to the President-elect Trump when we meet? First of all, I don't know when we will meet because he doesn't say anything about it. I haven't spoken to him for more than 4 years, and I am ready for it. Of course, at any time. And I will be ready for a meeting if he wants it. Politics is the art of compromise. And we have always said that we are ready for both negotiations and compromises. It is just that the opposite side, in the literal and figurative sense of the word, refused to negotiate. And we are always ready for this. The result of these negotiations is always compromise.
另外，当天法国总统马克宏视察了印度洋群岛马约特因飓风奇多造成的灾害。在一家医院外，马克宏遇到了一位当地居民，该居民当场对马克宏的援助承诺提出质疑，并要求给予飓风受害者更多帮助。
Moi je vous dis ce que vous racontez. Non mais moi je vous ai écouté déjà à la radio. Je vous ai écouté vous faire interpeller. Les réponses que vous donnez, ils sont hors plaque. Non mais c'est réalité. Moi je viens de Ouangani, l'eau n'y est pas. Il n'y a aucun service qui est là. Non mais c'est normal. Au bout de 6 jours. Après 6 jours c'est normal. Vous trouvez que c'est normal ça? On ne sait même pas à combien. Non monsieur. Non mais attendez. Oui. Non mais vous n'y êtes pas là-bas. Non, mais c'est une réalité. Vous voulez. Mais dites alors. Parce que nous, ce qu'on vit sur le territoire, sur le terrain, c'est parce que vous racontez dans les médias. Non, mais aussi, vous avez dit que les secours sont arrivés, l'eau va être arrivée, tout le monde. Non, c'est pas la réalité. Mais c'est ce que vous avez dit à la télé. Et c'est ce que vous dites. Dites alors. Oui, dites.
Alors, j'ai dit, là, quand je dis les premières dans l'implémentation sont arrivées au port et à l'aéroport.
6 jours après, Monsieur le Président, c'est pas normal. On le savait bien que ça pouvait.
Non, pardon. Vous êtes très fort si vous saviez tout ce qui allait arriver. Il y avait eu des alertes qui ont été données par le préfet. Vous savez, monsieur, laissez-moi vous répondre.
Mais ça, c'est. Le bidonville, on savait que ça allait être une catastrophe.
Mais c'est pour ça qu'on veut les enlever, les bidonvilles.
Oui, mais 6 jours après, vous n'êtes même pas arrivé à Ouangani.
Mais monsieur, qu'est-ce qu'on a fait pour arriver à Ouangani? On a déblayé. On a envoyé des forces militaires et déblayé.
Monsieur Tani n'habite pas à Ouangani.
D'abord déblayé. On a mis 4 jours. On a déblayé, on a envoyé des militaires de la sécurité civile pour déblayer. Ensuite, on a planifié pour que là, ça arrive par la route. Ensuite, on a planifié. Quand je vous dis l'eau, laissez-moi.
Non, mais je vous dis que vous planifiez, mais pas
sinon, si vous voulez crier pour faire la caméra,
non, c'est pas pour crier.
Si ça vous intéresse d'avoir ma réponse, je vous la donne. Mais si ça vous intéresse pas, je continue à aller saluer les gens.
Je vous dis, votre réponse est hors place parce que les secours ne sont pas arrivés.